Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Babbling Irons. Today, we're going to do a review of our summer transfer window, which surprisingly went quite well. I think we could probably all agree. So you have myself today, and also you have Sloth. Sloth, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, going well, thanks. Just worked 6 days in a row, so it's been a little quiet of late when I've gotten home, and it's a nice change of pace.
Good.
What a positive start to the window being shut, I think.
Yeah, I think it was nice going into a final day or final deadline day without actually really having too much to worry about. Obviously, there was the slight thing with Dawson, but we can get all into that in a moment. And I think it's probably good place to start is essentially how we ended last season in terms of the team. So this was our team last season. As you can see, there were a few in there that you can say is some deadwood. Obviously, when we talk about the outbounds, also we had David Martin leaving, Issa Diop has obviously now gone to Fulham. Masuaku has never really, you could say, hit the heights that we probably expected or hoped. And obviously was support to Cresswell over the season. Noble, unfortunately, obviously he decided to call time in his career, which was created a bit of a leadership void, I think, in the very first couple of games of the season. But we seem to have found ourselves a bit of an equilibrium since then. Alex Crowell, the man who never played, has obviously.
Car, which
Yeah.
is heartbreaking.
Then we have Nikola Vlasic, who unfortunately didn't seem to get much of a go last season. Never really seemed to get into any kind of form. Obviously, he's already banging in goals in Torino. He's already got 2 goals. And if you see last night, he absolutely funded his one in against Atalanta, which is pretty good finish. And then obviously, Andrei Yarmolenko also left. So, we saw quite a few of the squad leave, which left us this season really looking a bit threadbare, really. Coming into the actual window, this is essentially how our depth looked. You can see where we had issues. Obviously, Areola, we brought him back in, so he didn't really leave, which was a good thing. But you can see, really, when you look at our whole entire left-hand side, we only had one option. And even Ogbonna as an option wasn't even fit going into the season. So, in theory, we had 2 defenders who were fundamentally right-sided defenders. We had no midfield because, again, we had Souček and Rice only because we lost 2 midfielders. Benrahma had no competition really last year, apart from Fornals playing out opposition, and Bowen, had Yarmolenko, and obviously Antonio went the whole season yet again with no one up there. But that meant obviously we had quite a bit of work to do in the transfer window. So, come the start of the window, Sloth, what was your idea as to what we needed? And then we'll obviously get into what we did do, but your initial thought at the start of the season as to what we needed and how we needed to go about it.
I mean, I've been pretty consistent all along in that we needed a lot of pace. We needed a lot younger players, and we also just needed depth as well. So we knew we were going to be playing more games. We knew that the squad that we had played a lot of football, and they had a lot less time to break for that, and they would have a lot more games in quick succession. So in a shorter space of time. So we knew things were going to be pretty difficult. So we definitely needed different approach. And I think we absolutely nailed it, to be honest. I think there's a couple of things we could have done. Obviously, this is a opinion-based channel, and it's been such a good window that it's basically me just being greedy if I'm going to pick holes in it. But I think the key element that we needed were lowering the average age of the squad, adding pace, and addressing the depth, because everyone knows the Europa Conference League, European football adds so many more games and it drains you so much more physically. And
especially when you consider, obviously, the English league, you have 3 domestic competitions, whereas most European leagues don't really have that. at that, as you say, European competition meant we really needed to up our game. When you look at how bad our team was in terms of the well, just the ability to have players. You know, when we go back to this, you can just see just how much of a tall order it was at the start of the season. You know, we needed something in our engine room, as you say, needed to bring the average age down, but defense needed arguably an overhaul again to bring in players and to improve what we had. Again, midfield in itself incredibly light, and also up front. So it was a huge task for West Ham to manage this. And also, we did see very early on some negativity put towards the likes of Newman, and you know, some people even calling into question as to what he does and what he offers to West Ham. What we then saw transpire was quite a feat of bringing the club and the fans back round to actually seeing why patience is a virtue. And I think what we all knew is that our defence, whilst it was good in times last year, we all agreed that it was aging, and it still has some players that we will need to look to address in the kind of near future. But essentially, what we saw at the start of the window was us building from the back. We went and got Aguerd, depending on the pronunciation of his name, which was obviously a fantastic signing. I do think in some ways, now, blessing in disguise is not the correct term, but what I mean is, when I say that, what I mean is his injury brought about us going and getting Thilo Kehrer. Most likely, we most likely would not have ventured in for another full centre-back had he not been injured. But his injury meant we had to go get a quality centre-back who could be a starter as opposed to maybe being more of a supporting role. And it's now meant that we have 3 top quality centre-backs when all fit. Obviously, we do have Ogbonna, so you can say 4. And if you want to, you could also say 5 with Dawson. But with Dawson, yet we don't know how he is a professional. He will give everything. But again, his heart's not necessarily in being at West Ham because he wants to go home. And that is fair enough. And you can't have a go to go for that for after last year and heroics he put in. He did probably deserved to be allowed to leave. Certain things transpired, which meant he didn't. But, you know, he's part of the team. But based on, you know, our activity in defence, how do you rate it? How do you think it went? I personally feel we probably should have moved quicker at left back, but I'm still happy with what we have.
Yeah, I think, you know, we were both quite critical of the choice of Emerson, I think, but it's obvious now that that's really helped with other deals, which is massive for us. So I do think one of the things that we could have done defensively is to address it a bit quicker. I've said all along, safeguarding is the issue, and I do worry about Zuma's knee. That's not taking anything away from the window. I just you know, I study sports science, and we know he's got a string of knee injuries, and chances are if you have one serious knee injury, it's going to get worse if you have another, and then having it in either knee like Zouma and Ogbonna have had, then that's a bit of a that's a really scary situation to be in, because although it's very unlikely, if there's even a remote chance that that both of them suffer a knee injury at around the same time, or even overlapping in any way, then you are in serious trouble. And I think we've addressed that really well. I do think we could have done it sooner, and I that was one of the main criticisms that I had with the window, is that it just felt like we waited for certain things to happen when we should have been proactive. And I'm really
for other people's dominoes to fall before we moved. And I think that was the case with left back when we wanted Malacia, but we didn't move for him until there was a move from, I think it was Lyon actually, first, and then we went in with Man United at the same time. Again with Windle, we waited again. obviously both of those players had their hearts set elsewhere once other clubs had come in. But again, it's had we moved quicker, we may have had, a very good young Dutch fullback. Obviously, Malasia in particular has looked good when he's played for United. Really looked to have, he's got that bit about him. But again, it's hard to be critical of the Emerson one when it's brought about a very good deal for us. And, the experience he has, again, it's something that reassures Moyes over than, say, a younger talent. And I think that's the other thing. He is now going to need to come in probably sooner than Moyes would have liked, because obviously Cresswell apparently picked up a knock after the Tottenham game or during the Tottenham game. So it's one of those ones where, in hindsight, at the time, it didn't necessarily seem as positive as it could be. But when we look at it now, it's actually probably paid slightly for itself because of what it potentially brought us.
Well, I think it's one of the big victories as well for me, just from a slightly different perspective, is the fact that the club are going to look to change how they do their business in the future, and they're going to look to change their approach to deals and to the transfer market going forward. Now, I've got a hunch that would be a Newman-led thing rather than a Moyes-led thing, which is not a dig at Moyes in any way. I just think Newman it seems like one of those people to try and get deals arranged, if he's got a target, go for it. We saw that with the Onana saga, which we didn't get in the end, but we saw that similar approach. He found a target and he went for it. Now, if the approach had been earlier in the window, you do kind of think, could we have got that over the line then, or would something have changed? And obviously that's all hypothetical, but one thing that I think we can take away from that is just, it's good to see the club acknowledging these things, and hopefully it's going to mean that we get a bit more investment into the recruiting network, but also the academy itself, because let's not forget that so much of transfers and recruitment now is within a youth setup.
Yeah.
And we see just how important that is with Man City, and obviously the work that Newman did at City to try and make that happen, to try and get these youngsters in. And
it's an overall transfer strategy, as opposed to you have a first team strategy and you have a youth strategy. It's an overall strategy in which you buy at all levels to improve the first team. And I think that's what it is. It's an all-encompassing strategy. And I think you made an interesting point as to it's probably going to be a Newman-led project in which to do that. But I think it's also indicative of the fact that we're probably going to see change at a board level over the next 1, 2 to even 3 years. I'm also Moyes and Newman are seen or deemed to be there for the long term. So whilst our incumbent are taking steps back and others are maybe taking more of a more vocal kind of point. And I think, again, as you made that point as to our early dealing in the window, we were probably regressing slightly back on some deals as to traditional way of working. And I think once that kind of got kiboshed, I think probably the Danjuma one changed the attitude as to actually what are we doing here, because we seem to, whilst it was a very promising deal that the fans were happy with and kind of looking at, I think what it also highlighted was that the duality of West Ham, and that we have these two competing voices constantly when it comes to deals rather than a kind of unity. There's always going to be disruptions and there's always going to be conflicting views in a window. I think it's one of those ones that showed us up to be unprofessional. And there was too much conversations them going out. And I think after that, it kind of, certain people were, I think, probably put in their place, and even at a board level, as to we need to act like an actual business rather than a bunch of people on the market stall saying, I want that one, I want that one.
And I mean, it's when we talk about this and and we talk about the way deals are done, a lot of people tend to think that, all we're doing is criticizing. And, I can understand why they might feel like that, especially when we've just had such a good window. But I think it's important to stress that when that happens, when you act like that, you piss players off, you piss clubs off, you piss staffs off, you piss agents off. And how important that is going forward it's massive. It can't be understated. So, we might have had a fantastic window, but that can have a knock-on effect for other windows. And we still hear jokes about the Dildo Brothers and the sorry, we probably just got demonetized or whatever it is from YouTube for that use of word. But the thing is going forward that we've already annoyed Brentford, we've already annoyed Sporting Lisbon, we risked annoying PSG, and thankfully we've fixed that relationship with our purchases. But going forward, the approach does need to change, because otherwise, if you annoy players like Danjuma, if you annoy their agents, and if you annoy the club, you're in serious trouble, because that's going to spread, and you're suddenly the club that no one wants to deal with.
Yeah,
and it's a mark of what a good job that I think Newman and even Moyes are doing, that they're able to talk to these players and get them to want to join. I mean, a year ago, who'd have thought we'd have Paqueta in and around the club? Who'd have thought we'd have Scamacca, when in particular one of the clubs looking at him was PSG? That's huge. That's a huge statement.
Yeah.
And
we'll touch on the Scamacca one in a bit as well, because obviously there's a conversation that's been had by Sassuolo's chairman, which we'll discuss in a bit. But just to bring it back to obviously the kind of defensive kind of shape up we did. Obviously, we brought in Areola, obviously Aguerd, Kehrer, and Emerson. In particular, with Kehrer and Areola, we've mentioned the fact that people have constantly criticised us undercutting or underbidding from a valuation, but we also need to acknowledge that actually a first bid is often to be done to be slightly inflammatory, because it's to gauge the reaction of the selling club. Obviously, if you get a lukewarm kind of feel, you probably know that you're not far off. So in the case of Kehrer, we were told it was 20 million. We bid 10 million euros. Our fan base was outraged. We ended up paying 12 million plus some bonuses. So in actual fact, we have to actually be less reactionary and actually understand that if a first bid is a lot less, it's not that we're being derisory. It's that we are testing the market, or testing how strong a resolve they have in some cases. And yes, it's going up in the case of Vanaken, 1 million at a time. We also have to consider that, well, just because the club is asking for 20 million doesn't mean we value him at 20 million. We can only go in at our value. We have to consider that we have a budget. So we have to try and strike the best deal we can. And obviously, we always say that, we're just annoying clubs. We're stopping clubs from wanting to talk to us. But with those conversations are still engaging, we need to acknowledge as fans that actually that bid wasn't wrong.
Yeah,
that bid was what it was, an opening bid, some opener to the conversation in which to discuss the future of that player potentially coming.
I think the problem is that there's a way to start a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often under Golden Sullivan leading the negotiations, we saw them start a conversation with
half a bean.
a swear word, or a different form of approach. A slap on the backside. Some people might refer to it as. But I think when you look at how important your conduct is in any walk of life, it's something that was always going to get addressed at some point. But I'm glad to see that we're addressing it going forward, but also after seeing that, you know, it's that 50-50 approach of, well, you value, it's like us, if Chelsea bid 100 million and we said, well, we value a Rice at 150 million, how can we meet? It's making sure that you don't annoy clubs and send them emails saying, you know, we're going to go for a player from PSG, or just, again, bid £500,000 more, like, you know, we did with Hogan or whatever. It's that conduct and structure of business that we need to look at. Yeah. So I think defensively, we saw how well it worked with Clara, but we also knew that PSG needed to sell. They needed to move people off the books. And so going forward with that, if it's not a derisory offer, which, you know, PSG clearly didn't think it was, then yeah, maybe we do need to react. Maybe fans do need to kind of think.
And even with Abiola, we dropped it, I think, about down by another 3 million to what the initial agreed price was as well. So again, we utilised the fact and our knowledge of them needing to sell in which to generate a much smaller fee for us. And with Emerson, we did, again, much the same. But in fact, it was, we knew the player needed to move to play and he wanted to play football. So again, we used that as a tool to go, fine, if you're not going to play ball, you're going to ask for too much money, we'll leave. We almost had it, you know, we almost have got an agreement with your club. You don't want to play, you don't want to sign for us, then fine, then we don't want you to sign for us. And then that obviously turned him around to be, well, actually, I want to play football, I want to be in the Premier League. Let's have a proper conversation rather than one where I'm coming from Chelsea, I expect Chelsea wages. I think that was really smart from the club.
Well, look at the Cornet deal and how he got that done. You know, he was joining. He was having conversations with Forest and he was having conversations with Everton, and you know, it was well publicised that we made a loan to buy approach, which I think was smart, but we basically, you know, tested the water with that and then found out actually other clubs are moving and we need to just bid the release clause.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just park it quick because we will touch on Cornet. I've got a plan. I've put it all together in a nice, neat kind of session as we go through the team.
Look at me fucking things randomly and
clearly the whole point. This is why it works. But you know, we did what we needed to in defence. We needed to improve our left back position. We did that. We needed to add depth and quality to our centre back kind of pairing. We did that with Agerd and Tilo. Tilo obviously now means that we can play as a 3 when Agerd is back, and if we play a 2, we've got great options now in terms of what that pairing is, depending on what we want to do in that kind of tactic of maybe being more possession based out the back, or maybe having a good mix. But then obviously we then moved into our midfield where we had obviously Crowley. We also saw obviously Noble retire. So in the engine room, we needed to do a bit of work. Now, I think we will both agree it wasn't how we would wanted the engine room. I think we've probably both been happy enough if Coventry given a chance, which he seems to be done, or seems to be given. Obviously, we both have reservations on Downs. What has been positive is, despite him not playing, is the reports that he's doing a lot of extra training to kind of prove his worth to David Moyes and the team. Obviously, he was bought probably more for homegrown reasons and to create a relationship with an agency that has some very good players on there, in particular, a couple that me and you are very fond of. But yeah, our engine room probably is the area that I think, I don't want to say we missed a trick, because I don't think we necessarily had the budget in which to add to it because of where we then went with it. I think we tried to address our engine room with Onana, as in Amadou, not Jean Onana, who me and you have talked about extensively. I think we both would agree, had it been us, we'd have probably preferred John Onana to Downs because of how he plays. And obviously, there's a bit more of a defensive player with, I would guess, more, I would say with more pedigree because he's played in League One. But when you need homegrown players, he was a good player in the Championship last season. He does mean that we have, again, he's a hammer. So it's creating those little relationships intrinsically with the club because of his history as a supporter. And obviously then creating a strategic link, shall we say, or strategic relationship with a very good football agency. So I can understand why we did the deal. I wouldn't necessarily say it's one that's excited or necessarily improved our engine room because we still have Souček and Rice as a duo, and we did have quite considerable concerns over Souček, not just because of his long-term future, but because of his form. So it's the one area I would say I feel less confident in terms of, as I say, the engine room of the team. I don't think that has gone up from last season, but I'm going to stop waffling. Let you come in on this now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me that would be that's one of the two kind of sticking points that put from being 10 for me. I'll get onto the other one later on, but the first one is just that centre. I've said it all along. I think we need an anchor, and I think that really kind of detracts from the centre mid. Like we saw it against Spurs when Rice bombs forward. I don't think he's good enough in attack. I think he's a massive talent, and he's an incredible footballer, but he just needs to improve his output. He needs to improve his consistency in the attack to really kind of make sure that we don't see what happened against Spurs. We don't see those breaks going on. It was a really terrible 1-2, and you know, he's not to blame for that goal, I don't think, but he's the start of that goal.
But he was out of, again, but as you say, he's
now
to position and not having a player who is recognising that potential danger and coming across to actually support if that happens. Yeah, that's where we come from. But I think also, again, tactically, the way we set up meant if him and Souček went forward, then that was the risk we were always going to take.
Now, I think there's a lot to be said for Downs' passing stats, as we mentioned, are they were fantastic last year. Now, a lot of people were online after the West Ham game criticising a certain site for using stats to analyse a player's performance for us. So I do find it somewhat ironic that suddenly people are saying they should pick Downs over Souček based on stats. But for me, I think if you want him in the side, you're going to play a different type of football. You're going to be looking to pass more. You're going to retain possession. And Souček is an absolute battering ram who will guarantee you goals if you play in a certain way. What that negates is the person next to him going forward and bombing forward as much as he does without providing defensive cover. So having that anchor, and I've seen a few people suggest that Kehrer could move into a central defensive mid position. I think that's a great shout, especially if we look to kind of have 5 players at the back, and he's the more advanced of them in central defensive mid spot. I think that's a fantastic move, but we aren't quite doing that at the moment. And I think someone like Jean Onana, for what was €6 million in the end. I mean, we were willing to pay €6 million for Aina from Torino, and I just think that's one that kind of got away. But that's my only really bugbear at centre mid. I do think Downs is a good player, and the stuff I really want him to succeed. But the extra training and what we're hearing about him, I just think is going to be the difference.
Yeah, so, that's what's helping me endear to the deal. I think, as I say, I feel that it was a deal that was maybe made because again, we lost the club captain, West Ham man and boy. We've brought in a West Ham fan. It kind of eased that kind of sentiment. And again, it created a strategic partnership with a very good sporting agency as well. So I can understand why he came in. He will, and also let's not forget, he is a good football player. He's just maybe not what we wanted in terms of quality overall for the team. We wanted people to push Rice and Souček, but we haven't necessarily got that in their exact positions this time round. But I think the reason why is, quite frankly, as this says, we're trying to put our best foot forward and trying to improve our quality and attack. And when you look at those three names, it's quite impressive. You know, Cornet had a fantastic season for Burnley last year, the team that was really struggling. Obviously, Scamacca was one of the most sought after strikers this summer. Probably him and Etetike were probably the two who were the most sought after young players. And then we went and smashed, absolutely smashed our record for a signing in Lucas Paqueta. So when you look at those three, it's an incredible step up from what we had before. Obviously, Cornet will then allow Fornals to be more central, although he ended up playing left wing back the other night.
Yeah.
But
although he did well there.
I thought he did fantastically, to be honest, at left wing back. It's not a position he particularly likes, but he was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, we brought in Cornet, who again is a specialist in any position down that left-hand side, it would seem. Obviously, Lucas Paqueta is, when we're looking at next level, you would argue he is a next level sign, especially when you look at him statistically last year in league, and he was incredible for Lyon in that regard. And then Scamacca is finally means we have support for Michail Antonio, which is something we, as a fan base, been screaming for such a long time. And again, it's an incredible talent in Scamacca. And I think that when you look at that three, if you just completely ignored what we already had, that is a free that would be an envy for most teams. And that is a free where you look at it and go, ultimately, there seems like a very good balance between those as to what qualities they will all draw out of each other. And I think that's the excitement about those three. Before you even consider what we already have, that we've added great variation and players that would seemingly complement one another as well in a strike force. And that in itself is so important and so great because it can create a chemistry that we're probably crying out for at times.
Yeah, I think I'll get the negative out the way first. This is my only other sticking point. Just I do think an extra forward, an extra versatile forward would have really boosted this window to a 10 out of 10. I know we were linked with Toure in the dying days of the window. I think that would have been a fantastic signing, just because it safeguards again. It's one of those things where, if, and heaven forbid, touch wood, that Antonio doesn't get injured and has another season like last year, then we're just left with Scamacca up top. So I am still a little bit worried there, but we have then also got players like Cornet, Bowen can fill in up top, and we've got options who can fill in behind. So I get that it's not of the utmost urgency.
Yeah. Now, had Chelsea played ball, that sounds ridiculous to say. If they played ball with us, but we would have had that extra striker because we would have likely got Brozier on loan, which would have safeguarded us. So against Tottenham, it'd been fantastic because we would have had, obviously, Scamacca being ill, we would have had another striker we could have brought on that maybe could have changed the tide and got us that last-minute winner. But I think, all in all, as you say, the safeguarding is always the thing we want, which is why when you say that your main one is the striker piece, my main hang-up is the right hand side. We have nothing to really push Bowen unless we're going to tell to push Cornet there, which then again means Fornals is probably going to be the alternative at left side with Ben Rama, which again then doesn't improve our left side. Cornet staying as a left winger, it does improve the quality because it pushes Ben Rama. But again, we do have, for all the greatness we've done in that attack, we have maybe neglected the right hand side. But I think we also have to acknowledge budget in this whole conversation that in the end we prioritized the positions that needed the most strengthening and the most attention. Obviously we allowed Okaflex and Neves to kind of go on loan, so we don't necessarily have a youngster. Chesters as well. We don't necessarily have a youth player to come through on that right hand side, but again, we have other players that can operate that. And whilst we kind of talk about that safeguard and centre forward, one of the things that if I'm going to spin it positively, is that as we saw in the summer, sorry, that's my fiance just coming home, so the dogs have just gone nuts. That Mubamba was quality in the pre-season games, and due to him being quality, it kind of leads me to be quite happy that should he still perform in the under 21s, I might need to go answer the door in a second. Should he perform for the under 21s, then we have a very good option to come through and support. I'm going to go answer the door, so you carry on.
Yeah, well, I think you've absolutely nailed it, to be honest. And we have also had a comment from Irish Tommy and saying that the strength of the bench is a huge contrast to the season last season, which I completely agree with. It's really taken a step up. My only worry is that kind of depth in attack, as I mentioned. But I think we've got enough makeshift players there. And if we do give youngsters a chance, like you mentioned, Mike, then that will be a real positive. I do think that there's a bit of a main address in terms of pace, and that was the big thing that we've kind of looked at. I know in the past, you and I have repeatedly mentioned that pace is the issue, and I think this season we've really looked at that. The issue is just that depth. When we've got players coming off the bench, they're not exactly rapid. I adore Fornals, but he's not blessed with pace, and Lanzini's not either. It's really the only kind of negative from that window in terms of the attack, because Scamacca, Paqueta, and Cornet are, there's no other real way to put it. That's a sensational upgrade.
I think the good thing is, though, whilst we lack pace, I think with the players that we now have, and I think what we saw against Tottenham as well, is we countered our own weakness in the sense of when we played the ball quickly, and we have players who are quicker of foot, in mind, they kind of play with a one-touch football a bit more, and that means actually you kind of negate and that kind of that pace element. We broke very quickly a couple of times. We had some really good direct passing against Spurs, which obviously caused them to commit fouls and get yellow cards, which meant we kind of stopped their midfield from battling with us, because we put them on cautions early because we played the ball very quickly, we pushed it through. So I think the good thing is that our attack is quite quick witted, I think, in that respect. So we kind of negate some of that need for the pace. Obviously, Scamacca is incredibly intelligent as a centre forward. Cornet is blessed with pace, which is great. Paqueta has actually got some pace as well. But again, he's also very quick in mind as to spotting kind of where to pass, when to kind of give and go, and so on as well. So we have added a bit of pace, physical pace, but we've also got good kind of players that get a picture very quickly off the pitch as well, I think, which is massive for our attack.
And just a quick second to toot our own horns, because I think where we had a lot of people questioning what kind of player Paqueta was, how he plays, and we even addressed a few comments of people saying he was a luxury player. He came on and really showed his work ethic. And
one of the first contributions was 2 tackles, one on Harry Kane, and I can't remember who the other one was, but yeah, he came on, won the ball in two tackles directly, one after each other. So yeah, he kind of made a point. Yeah.
So I thought it was fantastic. But one thing that we can't get away from is just the fact that that's such a huge upgrade to the attack. And with Scamacca, we've got a player who is young, but also plays to the style that we know Moyes wants to. He fits that bill perfectly. And I think we've already seen that he's got that sort of Ibrahimovic flair. I know that's the player that he likes to be compared to, but he's already shown a bit of a few glimpses of that, and hopefully can transfer that over into the Premier League.
Yeah.
Obviously, this sickness is very unfortunate timing for him, because I think he definitely would have featured against Spurs, but in some way, whether that's off the bench or whatever. But it's really good to see these guys coming in, and where we've seen in the past Moyes somewhat hesitant to play players straight away, he's really dropped these guys in quickly. And Paqueta, Cornet, and Scamacca have all been given minutes early on.
Yep. And I think it's to Tommy's point, the strength of our bench is a huge contrast to last season. I was on a Tottenham podcast earlier talking around the game, and I actually said that weirdly, when I think you looked at Tottenham's bench and you looked at our bench, and obviously in that game specifically, you would probably argue of the stronger of the 2 benches, it was actually West Ham's, which is an incredible statement to be making considering it's Tottenham. And, we obviously always talk about Tottenham as being reluctantly as being a better team, and a team that is obviously higher in the league. But to be able to sit there and say, well, if you look at our bench, we had more on our bench, and also consider the fact that we also had an injury in that we didn't, well, I say injury, we didn't have Scamacca on the bench. Had he been there, we would have had Scamacca, Cornet, Paqueta, and also even Lanzini. Obviously, we know his star is dwindling a little, but still, that's 4 players that we could bring on, considering you can make 5 now, who could potentially come on and make a change in the game. So, Tommy's point is perfect. The strength in our bench is of a huge contrast, and I think what that will also see is an upturn in Moyes being more proactive in him using his bench, which I think we saw when he brought on Paqueta quite early, which is we were joking in the crowd saying, well, it's not 80 minutes yet, so I doubt we're going to see any other anyone coming on. But we did make substitutions, and I think now with Moyes getting more of his team, I think we'll see that happen a lot more. I think what will be interesting will be actually, and I know it's quite a way away, but next season when he has another window such as this where he gets to build is when he has really what he would consider his team. I think we'll see even more trust put in the bench, and it'd be a bit like I always love how Eddie Jones discussed substitutes in rugby, in that he had his starters and he has his finishers. And I think that will be, again, it will be that thing. It's like, you're not a substitute. You're coming on to finish the game. You're coming on to either get me the win or to secure me that win. It's that kind of mentality that you can then start to instill in the team. So obviously, again, it boosts that team kind of togetherness, is that everyone has a role to play. Even if your role is less involved, you still have a very key role.
Well, I think I know it's very early to say this, and I might get a few comments, but I think January is going to be massive, because obviously the situation with Aguerd isn't ideal. However, there are a lot of potential clubs where players could be looking to move, and
Yep.
You know, if
I think there's a particular one who's currently playing for PSV who didn't move, decided against the move.
if there's certain players who perform well and have big World Cups, you know, there could be moves on the cards. And I think if you, it's the easy one, and I keep kicking them when they're down. And I'm sorry if there's any Leicester fans watching. I don't like your club, but but I like your business. Sorry, but if a few of those players go away, or if they're having a bad season, getting to January, there's a lot of potential players who can be picked up and we know can have an impact. We know can make a difference. And it's going to be really interesting. You know, people were talking about Man United potentially underperforming and what that could mean for some of their players. But look at Leicester. And if they struggle, they could have Ndidi looking to leave. They could have...
We've already got Tielemans will be in last 6 months of his contract, so he can agree a pre-contract with teams abroad. So again, if he is looking to agree a contract, is he going to want to see out the last 6 months of his deal to the best of his ability as well? You also have the likes of Maddison. Is he going to want to hang around?
Yeah.
Potentially, no. He's probably going to want to leave.
Barnes, who is also a certain... represented by a certain agency we may have built bridges with.
Yep. So another player that we also like is Daka as well. You know, we need a striker or a player who can be flexible along that front line. So
they've got just
look at this, we can go quite happily pick off one or two of those players.
But I mean, I'm not just picking on Leicester here. Obviously, that's just to make myself feel a bit better. But there are
easy
lots
pickings at the moment.
I mean, there are lots of teams like that. And that's not just in England, that's across Europe. There's for a lot of
actually, you've kind of beat me to what was actually going to be my question anyway, but just before I redirect us back to this, one of the things that I think we should highlight is if we think of where our team was at the start of the season, this is where we were as a team at the start of the season. There were some very distinct holes in how we were set up to how we've ended when you kind of put them side by side and you just look at how much quality there is now in that team. Obviously, as we said, the engine room probably is the one where you would say could do something else, but you made a very valid point about January. One of those was a player mentioned that we may look at in January, and that was Ibrahim Sangare as well. Again, that's another player for the engine room. Obviously, the right-hand side is something we're probably going to need to look at because we only have Bowen, so something else as well. But also, another very important thing is what happens at Chelsea with certain players not playing. If Brozier doesn't play between now and the World Cup, is he going to be happy to come January to still be hanging around? Is Conor Gallagher, if he doesn't go to the World Cup because he's not playing for Chelsea, is he going to be willing to wait? Is he now going to want to leave? So I think, as you say, that the World Cup being where it is probably actually going to kick in some players, I think. I think it's really going to kind of make some players maybe focus their ideas as to, well, where is my career going? Or where do I want my career to go? I think, again, Cody Gakpo clearly felt he was better than the offers that came in. There's no disrespect to Leeds, no disrespect to Southampton, but it's very clear that whilst he maybe agreed terms, he also felt he can do better. And obviously the likes of Arsenal, Man United have all been linked to him. So you can understand why he then went, actually, I don't need to go to Premier League now to go to a bigger Premier League club. I can just continue my development here and then go. So I've got a few views where I think we could probably improve in January and obviously in the summer. Summer, I think, could be quite a big one because we maybe have a player leave because obviously Chelsea are going to be losing two big centre midfielders next year because their contracts are up. So obviously they're going to be looking for a new centre midfielder who can defend. So we obviously know who that is. But if you cast your mind forward to, say, January, again, as you say, we could potentially be looking to improve. and it could also be players looking to get out of their current clubs as well. So when you look forward to January and you look forward to summer, what would you expect the club to be looking to target and kind of move for?
Well, I'd just like to say I had absolutely no idea that was coming. So I've how I've segued myself into that, but it's
because we're on the same page. Page.
Great minds and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I do think that centre mid area is the one to be addressed, and I do also know that X said potentially we could go back in for Sangare. I think he will have had his head turned as well. You know, he was Chelsea, and Chelsea apparently made that move for him. I do think that with Zakaria there in that central defensive mid role, even on loan, I don't think they'd be looking to bring him in unless they got an offer or sold one of the players whose contract is running out. So I do think that's really the main area to address. You know how much I would like Sangare in that side, and what I think he'd bring to us. He's not the best passer, but you know, if all he has to do is pass it to Rice, or even just kind of move it out wide, then he's fine.
He's a very good disruptor, and he's very good in being in that disruptive role. And as we saw at the AFCON, he has actually developed since being in Holland that more offensive side of his game. But again, as a disruptor, he's a very good talent, and he's again, the joke we said throughout the window, he passes the height test.
He does, yeah, and I think there's a really good chance that there are going to be some clubs who are underperforming with a lot of talent. So come January, I would be looking to poach them. You know, we've people might think that's a bit of a dick move, but unfortunately, you know, we've had that throughout our history with our academy. You know, sides doing that to us. So
yeah,
I think
it's the industry where you kick the man when he's down, and then just for good measure, you put in your other foot as well. I think that's really football. It's kind of how it is.
And I think if there are sides underperforming, you know, it's for us to really do that.
Yeah.
If we know that players could potentially be unsettled, move for them. Make a bid, see what happens. Because as we saw with Vanaken, it didn't necessarily lead anywhere, but player power is a big thing. And if we can register some interest, and then the player goes, well, actually, I want to move.
Yep.
It's a really big difference in a deal.
I said last season as well that I would much prefer a quieter summer and bring forward that budget and spend in January. If we're in a position where we can really push on, then I think sometimes doing that, obviously you pay a premium in January, so that you always have to be wary. But I think, again, this January is going to be like no other January because we've never had a World Cup mid-season. Yeah. So we've never had teams that are going to be about 11 games in and then all of a sudden going directly into a transfer window after a World Cup. And there are going to be injuries. There are going to be players out of form. We don't know how it's going to impact. So we don't know how players are going to feel, because if certain players miss out on World Cups, again, it's going to change their midsummer mindset to be a lot more active in that. Well, I'm not going to go anywhere with my career here, so I need to move.
You just said midsummer mindset, and all I can think of is that scene with that in Midsummer.
Well, I'm hoping Atalanta have a terrible season. That's all I'm saying, because there are two players I would happily take from that team. Obviously, one of them play left back and right back as well.
Yeah, and I mean that's a really exciting thing. It's look how well Bowen did, and how well he did when he came in a January window. So I think there's a lot to be said for getting players in January, and this is going to be, as you said, a January like no other. I can't remember the point I was just going to make, which is incredibly frustrating. But with regards to January, I think there's areas that we can really look to address. And oh yes, I remember. Yes. So one of those players that I was really keen on last season was Kolo Muani, and of course he's moved to Frankfurt,
Yep.
and he has been probably their brightest star. I know that's not just a pat on the back, but this is what I'm saying in terms of getting business done in January. I know they agreed a pre-contract with him then, but looking to make those moves is going to get you results at the end of the day.
Yep.
So
even after the January window as well, it's just when you know roughly where you're going to be, it's setting up those deals so you can act very quickly in the summer, which I think was what our frustration was at the early part of our window, is that we didn't seem to have deals being lined up until we obviously got again, and then we hit a bit of a rhythm. But yeah, I think, in January, I think we're probably going to look at midfield, and I would hazard to guess maybe the right hand side, whether that be finding someone who can support Boeing, because obviously we don't have a natural option there. We don't know. Even one of the youngsters may play and perform really well on loan. We may actually think about calling them back to provide some assistance to that role. But also right back, we have looked at that. If Soufal fails to impress Moyes, then we could also look to readdress right back again, because we were clearly looking within that. I think in the summer we're going to have to address the homegrown element, because we potentially could lose Rice if we don't qualify for Champions League, which again is a very big ask for the club. But there's clearly aspirations of that. You don't sign players like Paqueta if you're not aiming for that kind of competition. But I think if we were to lose Rice, then obviously we need to address the homegrown element, because we need to have homegrown players. But I do actually think, while many people have trepidation around him going, I do find it quite an exciting prospect, in that I do think it opens up new avenues as to what we can bring in from midfield. For instance, like a Coop Miners, like a Manu Kone, or Kepran Turan. Players like that, these are players that are incredibly good. And when people say he's irreplaceable, as a figure, as a statement in the club, I agree. As a player, statistically, that is not true. He is replaceable. And there are players statistically that can replace him. But again, we have to be aware that in some way we have to do that. And I think we can only improve our chances of keeping Rice by really pushing on this season. Again, maybe in January, pushing the boat out again. We've shown great ambition. All comes down to money and how much we are willing to have invested by our board. But it's an exciting time. I think when you look at where we were at the start of this window to where we are now, it's an incredible piece of work. And to be able to sit in a game where we're watching West Ham versus Tottenham, and you look at the benches and going, well, our bench is probably stronger than theirs, is quite a statement that we've not been able to make about teams for a very long time. And, full credit to David Moyes. He rejected players he didn't want, like Danjuma. We maybe as fans didn't always agree, but he has essentially built a team that he is very comfortable with. And with Newman, they've made quite a substantial statement in a season where we were saying we needed to make statement signings for Rice, and we haven't just made statement signings based on fee. We've made the quality signings that actually have sensible connections and links to us as to how we play tactically, and they're all actually going to improve us. And like we said, with that front three that we've kind of brought in with Cornet, Paqueta and Scamacca, that there is so many complementary attributes and traits between them that it actually shows for once a very clear idea as to the players we want and what those players will bring for us tactically. And I think that's a fantastic way of doing this window. As we said before, I can't give a 10. I refuse to give a 10 out of 10. I think it's very close to that. I think if we win something at the end of this year, 100% I would say it's a 10 out of 10 window. Because personally, I don't feel you can say you have a perfect window unless you actually win something.
Yeah.
But, it's a very solid 9 for me this season. I just think, but actually, no. I'm going to say it's a very solid 8 because I do think there are still a couple of positions we could have addressed, like centre midfield and right wing. I think I'm going to have to say it's an 8 for me. It's a very, very strong 8. If we win something, then it has to be a 10 because, quite frankly, what they've done, and if we win something, then that just says that the window was perfect because we have silverware and we haven't had that for over 30 years. So that has to be down to the recruitment and the management. So you have to then say it's 10 out of 10. So that's where I am. It's an 8. We win something, it's a 10. that's for me.
I'm gonna be ever so slightly more positive and just say it's 9 for me. I do think the building of the link with agents or certain agencies is very good. We have seen our pound of flesh for a certain Mr. Salthouse, and that we've both been openly critical of how we've used agents in the past, but I think we're seeing that change, and why that is purely subjective. I'm not going to get involved in that, but we've seen the importance of good relationships with agents, with Wolves deal this window, with Nunes, like how important that was. You can't overstate how important that was for that deal to happen, because otherwise
and it's quite funny, isn't it, when you look at the players that have rejected us, and it hurt at the time, how some of those rejections have probably turned into the next deal then being a level up from the deal that we've been negotiating. Obviously, Paqueta is we went for Zelensky, we went for Onana, we obviously went for Lingard. You look at those kind of attacking midfield options, and then we end up with Lucas Paqueta, and you actually then go, well, every rejection was leading us down a path where we actually got an even better player. So that's why I always said throughout the window, the meltdowns or the negativity, or as some people put it, the reality was a bit too much.
Well, I think it's easy to get swept up in transfer. So talk about.
I think it's the thing, isn't it? Everyone gets swept up.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to get swept up in it and react to those rumors, react to the bids, and it's only normal to do that. So for me, it's a 9. I think it's close to winning something. That's why I mentioned January, to be honest, because I think I'm not going to sit here and say, had we signed a striker in January, we win Europa. That's not how football works. But I do think it's fair to say that if we sign a striker in January and we're still in the Conference League, or if we sign a right winger and a central defensive mid in January, then our chances of winning the Europa Conference League. And with that, football is a cruel mistress. It would have been very easy for us as a football club to have lost our opening games and gone, oh God, we need to find a new list of targets. And even though we got to the semi-finals of Europa, that's not going to matter to a lot of players. We've actually looked to make a statement and say, no, we want to be a team that is constantly challenging those positions and in and around getting far in European competition. So for me, it's a 9, building those relationships. But it's going to have to be a silverware at the end of it for me to make it a 10.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, I know I've said it's an 8 for me, but I'm only saying that because, again, I do feel that, you know, we obviously wanted a right back. We obviously could have done with a right midfielder for a bit more with Bowen. We obviously wanted another centre forward, and we wanted a centre mid. So there was clearly, the club felt there was work to do. So that's why I say for me it's probably an 8. If we win something, it's obviously going to be a 10 because we've done something we haven't done in 30 odd years. But, you know, I think we should wrap it up there. I think what we can conclude, it's been an incredibly positive window. It's one packed full of quality and players that complement one another. And I'm in danger of saying it, but we potentially are going next level with these players. You know, we were promised it about 8 years ago. Maybe we're starting to see the next level, but maybe we're already seeing next level because others are starting to see their own exit as well at the club. But let's end it on a positive note. We've had a great transfer window. We would love to know what you guys think. You know, please do. You know, if you like this video, please do like. Please do subscribe, share as well. Give us your own comments as well. How do you think the window went? Are you happy? Do you think we've missed anything in this window? Obviously, if you don't follow us on Twitter, we do have a Twitter handle. I'm getting so much better at all of this stuff. But yeah, please do follow us. We will endeavour to put stuff on. We are a man down and a man short, which is meaning that me and Sloth are having to organise a lot more because Frankie's not here. But again, Frankie, get well soon, mate, as well.
Yeah. Get well soon. Mike does say that we are a generous we, to be honest, Mike. I'm obviously just here because they couldn't get anyone better. But,
you're just here for the eye candy. Don't worry, mate.
Oh, yeah. This mop has to pay somehow, doesn't it? But no, it's really good. We want to see that interaction, and you know, we love discussing everything,
football, including West Ham.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think on that note, you know, again, it's a 9 from Sloth, it's an 8 from me. But if we win something, we're both in agreement that it is a solid, perfect 10. But without further ado, there's only one more thing to say and do. Come on, you are.